Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can we keep the part where I yell, more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, you want to start with that?
Here we go. Exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with the Smoky Bar.
No, it's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch. And it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. I'm Jeff. As always, with me is Dustin over there.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dustin.
You've been having a good Monday night.
Yeah, welcome to Monday night. It's a good one. Good to see you guys all in the chat there. As you might notice, there's a missing guest in the center here today. And that's what brings us to our title for today's episode. Expect the unexpected. Sometimes last minute things come up and plans have to change. And so we're going to talk about how that may affect your Dungeons and Dragons game or any other game you're running. For us, our unexpected outcome tonight was that our guest, Alex Gygax, was not able to make it tonight. So we're going to try to reschedule and get that going. I know if some of you guys are really excited to come see him tonight. We were really excited to have him. So hopefully we can get him back on here soon. But we do have an interesting topic nonetheless, as
Very
anyone
topical
who's
one for us right now.
That's right. I mean, anything you kind of look at day-to-day affairs of just living in the Corona world, life is not what you expect. It's very different. And that's correct, correct Pennywise daycare. No one expects Spanish Inquisition. So you have to be able to roll with those punches. So we're going to probably be talking about some things that have come up in our games that have kind of thrown us for a loop. There's certainly some notable things that happened this Wednesday with our Pathfinder game, but I'm sure Dustin has some as well.
Yeah, I was actually just talking about this yesterday with my Zweihander group that's not on stream. I was talking about the end of my Terra and Treefell game when my players decided to kind of turn on each other.
That was pretty unexpected.
If you've seen that episode, Chapter 10, World on Fire, like you watch Chapter 9, they're a well-oiled machine functioning perfectly, and by the end of the next session, they're murdering each other. They're abandoning each other to die. Like, there's one point the caster's trying to cast some high-level spell that doesn't exist, but she wanted to do it so bad, and I was willing to let it try. And, I think I even said in the middle of that stream, I was like, I don't even know what's going on here, but I want it to work so bad, I'm going to let you make a roll. Like, I didn't even know what was going to happen if it failed or succeeded at that point. Like, I didn't even know. So, like, players they'll pull things just out of nowhere. And, DM Thaco, thank you for the raid.
Much appreciated. Brought 11 with you. Thank you.
So, there's definitely situations where those kinds of things do definitely come up. So,
for those of you who just joined us here,
go ahead.
The subject of tonight's talk is expecting the unexpected. For many of you who have seen our previous advertisements of what we were expecting tonight, we had been in contact with Alex Gygax. He was supposed to be with us tonight to talk about growing up as a Gygax, and unfortunately, something must have come up. We had some scheduling snafu of some type here unexpectedly.
But
so
we will get them rescheduled. So we're going to make it happen. Don't you worry. It just unfortunately didn't happen tonight.
Yeah. So we'll get it on.
We appreciate the raid, DM Thaco. And I was just watching his show and chatting with him. We were talking murder hobos and all sorts of good stuff on his show a little bit ago. Nice. We were having a good time in the chat over there. So thank you for stopping by, Thaco. And congratulations to you and your crew on winning the DCC Dungeon Crawl, too.
Congrats.
You bastards. So I just like to, I take pride that I killed my party well. So, it was, yeah,
I was going to say, you splattered us pretty heavy with that steam monstrosity. I don't even think they had to fight.
Thing was nasty. So
That thing beat the hell out of us.
it was badass.
Thank you for the bits there, Liching Hour. So, Dustin, you were talking about your issue that came up with your game. What do you think contributed to some of these events?
Well, it was mostly my fault.
Okay.
I would love to tell you that I did not. Okay, so if you haven't seen Terror and Trayfell, fucking spoiler alert, but it's been over a month since the last episode aired, and I'm working on a sequel. So should not be a surprise to anyone at this point. But the whole goal for Terror and Trayfell was to see if I could get the party pushed to the brink where they would decide to ritually sacrifice an innocent 8-year-old girl. That was the goal for GMing. I'm like, I'm going to push them as hard as I can. So I just kept up the ante. They wouldn't do it. Up the ante more. They wouldn't do it. Up the ante more. They wouldn't do it. And I finally pushed them to the point where apparently killing each other was the only option left, because they still would not kill the NPC girl. So, it was a situation where they just wouldn't do it. And so they turned on each other.
Now, was that because your characters were moral, upstanding characters, or is that because of player choices, or
a little bit of column A? If you watch the 10 episodes, you'll see how it kind of developed. They kind of created some bonds with the little girl and her cousin, the little boy who gets ruthlessly murdered by this ghost in like episode 3. So,
gotcha.
They already seen one kid die. They were really not heading down that road, and so they wouldn't do it.
So
2 players thought maybe they should. They actually had a discussion about it at one point. I thought they were going to. Then they didn't do it. So I had to keep upping the ante.
Wow. So you were expecting an outcome, and you got this other outcome.
Right.
So when these sorts of things come up, though, I mean, it's obviously, if you have a plan in mind, when it doesn't go that way, it's a sudden shock for you in the midst of your game. When you don't have a chance to really prep anything. Now, I guess my question for you is, did you have anything preloaded, like in the event that they don't sacrifice the girl, blah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was, and I knew ahead of time that those stakes were going to have to be incredibly high. Like, I knew that there was players, even in a game that's kind of sometimes moral ambiguous, like Zweihander can be, like how that world's kind of set up, that kind of murky, dark area, or like a Shadowrun or anything like that, right? Like your player characters still come in with this idea that they're the heroes. They love to walk in with this idea that they're the heroes, and I love doing nothing more than make people have to question whether they're the heroes when I'm DMing. So I knew the stakes were going to be high, and I knew that like I had to take like a world-ending creature and make it the result of them not doing it, and that is exactly what I did. And then after that thing was summoned because they wouldn't do it, trying to figure out what they were going to do with the ramifications of their non-choice caused them to then turn on each other. So
now was it a choice for the audience here that was made out of like indifference, like they just didn't pull the trigger and so ramifications happened, or was it they made a choice that led to this outcome?
Each player was a little different.
Okay.
Lee House, the player of Everest, the elf, he had the flaw of basically being a coward, and so his character was like the first one to like turn and bolt and just leave his comrades out to hang. And then Woda, who played Hagen, he tried to kill one of the other NPCs, which suddenly now somehow she was on the table for being killed. So he was going to do that, but he botched his roll, and so then after that he just kind of feigned like, it just kind of bailed on him also. And then, poor Shoshi, who was playing Zelina the caster, she was the one trying to actually stop this thing outright and killed one of the other PCs as a ritual sacrifice to make a spell happen. And then when that went horribly wrong, then Scott,
really
who was the gnome, he finished off Zelina and killed her in an attempt to finish her ritual, and it still didn't work. And so it was bad that led to more bad. But it all started with a couple of them bailing on the group, and then when things started looking real grim, they turned on each other. So
desperate times, and when I was watching it and editing, it was just like, oh my God, wow. Okay, now what are you going to do? I mean, thankfully it was your last game session, right? So like the ramifications didn't extend past this one session.
They had 11 critical fails. 11 critical failed rolls. So, I mean, the dice were just going that direction. Like if they had succeeded on those rolls, it's a different ending to that story. And I was prepared for it to go either way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when that happened, it was, I just went where the dice went. And, you know, we were doing all digital dice. They were on screen. Can't ignore them. They're right there. Everybody saw it. Like, you can't fudge those.
Well, and that's another aspect of this. It gets really interesting is sometimes when you roll with the dice, things go a way you don't expect. Like, and I think when you're a DMing or game mastering, whatever you want to call it, you have to expect that all outcomes are possible, especially the ones you really don't know what will happen if they do, because those are the ones that require the most thinking. So, I mean, you have to have your improv skills for sure, because that just comes up. But you have to have some fleshed out ideas of what may come if these weird things happen. You
do. And I know between the two of us, I'm typically the one who kind of gets pegged as more of the plotter.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I do, because I do like to try to make sure that agency is on the table at all times. Like I do plan 5 or 6 paths out of any situation that I try to create.
Sure.
And in the recap, if you, it's only here on, did you put it on YouTube? I think it's only here on Twitch.
If I haven't put it on there, I'll put it up there now.
It doesn't matter if it's up there or not. I just want to make sure if anybody ever goes back and watches it. Scott, one of the players, asked me, he goes, was there any way to win this? And I was like, well, yeah, you could have sacrificed the girl. I mean, that's the obvious one. But it's just an NPC. You guys will kill every other NPC. Nobody usually cares. Like this little innocent girl, suddenly, you know, she couldn't be put on the table. But you know, I was like, there was various ways that you can get out of the situation. Some of them more heroic than others. And that's what I like when I GM is, and I'm going to do this with Horror and Huttenberg to a degree too, is there's going to be pathways out. And the easiest one is usually the dirtiest one. And then, you know, the dark side is the fast path, but it's also the one that corrupts you. And then there's the more heroic you want to be. Usually I ramp up the difficulty a little on how to get out of there in one piece. So it's not like it's not an option. It's just not the easiest option.
It feels better as the good guy when you know you had an option to do something easy and you chose to do the hard thing well. Yeah. And then when you pull it off, it feels good, you know?
And even with all the critical fails, like my players all tell you they had a great time. Like they did not, like I told them, I think even if you watch that video, I could not have wrote this. Like this is way better than anything I would have written. It was way better than anything I could have written for that story. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess for chat here, for those of you who have been in games or run games, I'm sure you got stories of things that have happened that just did not go the way you thought they were going to go. And a lot of times those stories end up being better than what was planned. So, you know, like,
let's turn the tables a little bit now.
Okay.
Here we go. For your Pathfinder second ed game.
Yeah.
you caved into public pressure.
I did.
To allow people to fuck with our storylines. And you took that and you ramped that shit up to 11.
I did.
Well, okay. You ramped it up to 10. There is an 11. We've seen it. The Grouch Couch does it. That's 11. You're sitting at about a 10 right now with Levi's Wild Magic. And it's up there. But nonetheless, we have seen some horrific level of messing with things, and how this last session ended has put you in quite the predicament.
It really has. So, fun fact, folks, if you decide to add a little bit of audience participation to your games, or a fun, quirky, wild magic effect, be sure you look at the full 10,000 items that are on that list and see what's going to come out of it. I've looked through some of them. I wanted some of them to be a surprise, so I didn't read them all. And I did not foresee having an earthquake of major magnitude locally while the party was in a boss fight underground. So we had some crazy stuff happen at the end of the last game, and that's where we are right now. One of our characters is near death from some choices they made, running into danger without a plan a couple times. Quite unremarkable fellow, doesn't like the 10,000 list.
Now, let's look at the pros and cons here. We have a localized earthquake of high magnitude. It is thank you, Zaylen, for the bits. It is currently, though, the beauty of this system with the 10,000 is that it is not mechanically listed. This is a pure RP storytelling device, which gives you a ton of room to play with it. It doesn't say there's an earthquake, everyone takes 10d10 plus 40 damage or something stupid based on magnitude. It's not like characters must save versus death. Like, there's nothing written into it. It's just giant earthquake happens in your location right now. And you're underground.
I've been milling around some ideas of how to deal with it and trying to decide how much severity it should have. Quite unremarkable fellow has it right. The list that we're using is listed as system agnostic. So that is a flexibility to it that is nice. So what I've been trying to consider is how impactful this needs to be to honor the fact that somebody participated and wanted an outcome to be cool. Thank you for the bits, Sir Malice and Zaylen.
Yeah, thank you.
But at the same time, I want the game to be something that the players can enjoy. And a scene where just the ceiling collapses on you and kills you, in my opinion, is not that. So I've been thinking of ways to inject some complications into the scene that is already a very challenging scene. But that could benefit both the party and the bad guy, or neither.
Now, we didn't exactly make this easy on ourselves.
No, you didn't.
At the beginning of, I actually re-listened to this session today on YouTube when I went on my 3-mile walk. I'll sometimes pull up one of our episodes and re-listen before the next episode. But I pulled up the previous episode, actually, I think it was. And, we had an opportunity to go to bed. And my character started to. And everyone else decided to stay up, and now no one has spells, no one's rested. There's penalties involved because of that now, and then the earthquake happens. So, here we are. And so this situation could already be bad, and now it's
and it really was
bad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember just watching what you guys were doing the games prior. I was like, okay, how bad is this dungeon going to end up being? I'm like, okay, the dogs that you guys are going to fight in the first section are no big deal. Odds of them actually getting hit by this trap, the first one, it's probably pretty low. It seems pretty telegraphed, a rope holding a door open to a scary house. And then the trip fall thing that you guys had the roof collapse on you in that corner. I was like, well, the odds are pretty good that you get past this. You see it pretty easily. The roll to avoid it's pretty easy, but I didn't factor in really critically bad rolls or just enthusiasm to go through doors.
But well, here's the thing. Now you can factor in, if you know your players well enough, things that they're going to do. Like, if you know the tendencies of me and you know the tendencies of Clint and Levi, you can say, in this situation, there's a good chance with the characters they're playing that this is what they'll do. Or this is what they might try to do. You can't factor in rolls. It's impossible.
Right.
You never know what the rolls are going to do. You can always expect there to be some good rolls and some bad rolls, but you never expect it to always go just solidly one direction or the other. Mm-hmm. And we've seen both of those things have some ridiculous effects. And Levi, we know Levi gets bored fast, then he opens doors. That's just part of Levi's nature. So, you could plan for a little bit of that.
Levi also talks in third person. That's true. And earlier, Eliezer was saying that her group uses this chart. It's where I actually got it from. And there's been many examples of their group getting events that almost killed them multiple times.
And I was watching that when he got saved.
And that's incredible. A really interesting circumstance. So for those of you watching this later or listening later that aren't seeing the chat, what happened in their game was that in game 3, and they're I think on 8 or something like that at this point. Yeah. One of the random events came up that I think it was the next time a character died, they would resurrect another town.
It's the same one that happened to Levi, but he didn't get to actually have it happen in your game. He got that same reincarnation one that then didn't happen.
Yeah, so it was if this character died, in this case the character's name was Negan, he'd resurrect 600 miles away. And they were just oh, this will never come up, right? And then in this game, they happened to be in a really bad situation, and he got killed. And the player was just this is probably their first character death experience at the table. And, it was this huge dramatic event that occurred. And then out of nowhere, this magic effect they've been sitting on since game 3, they had no idea was there, suddenly pops a character back up. So it actually created a really cool tension release kind of moment.
What's interesting in their particular situation is that even though the magic technically saves the character, it might still be character ending. Yeah, because he's now something else 600 miles away. So you have to do a fair amount of work. Dean Ferris has got his work cut out for him now, deciding if 600 miles can be bridged in a reasonable time by whatever this new version of this character is. So even though it technically saved him, like, well, you have to just see next time Air Laser Group plays whether he comes with a new character or not. Like, we're just not going to know.
Yeah, and they're saying it's a 20-day trip on horse for that character. And what complicated it even worse was that the audience triggered another one of these events to occur, and the one he got was that he was allergic to gold. So he couldn't touch gold without getting some kind of bad thing happening. So he can't even pay people to take him back now. Yeah. So it's wacky, it's weird, it's a lot. And so it is definitely... It is an added level of difficulty for a DM to handle. I'm learning that pretty quickly. I knew it was going to be challenging, but I didn't realize what exactly I'd be getting into.
Your problem is you do a lot of really good improv, but you still like to plan kind of what's going to go on. And if you're gonna adopt a system like this, and this is where I give the guys over the Grouch Couch all the credit in the world. Fucking Turk. Like, he has figured this shit out with what they do with the deck of many things and everything else. Like, they just keep adding cards all the time, right? And but he embraces the chaos, Jeff. You are never one who has embraced chaos.
That's true.
You just don't. And so this has got to be a bit tougher for you than it probably would be if I was running it.
Yes and no. I mean, as a player, I really don't like wild, chaotic effects personally, but I know that at least one of the players loves it. And when I'm running a game, it's more important to me that the people around the table are having fun than that I'm having an easy time. And so, Levi loves the wild magic. That's why he wanted the wild character. That's why we injected as an option for the audience to get involved, because I think it's more fun when more people are having a good time, and it seems like the chat has a good time with it. And we're running a module, so I don't have to get really attached to what's going on in the game. If I had written my own plot out and then the stuff was happening, say for instance, if this were occurring in Levi's 5th edition game Everstorm, that may have a different feel. Because
there's a reason why we didn't include stuff like this in Everstorm, and why Everstorm, and this is a group decision. It wasn't Levi's decision alone, but we very much, it's our baby, and it'll just remain that way. Everstorm is kind of the one selfish thing we still do. It's still for us. We're glad we have fans who enjoy it. We're putting it out there for everyone to see, but at the end of the day, it's still the one game we just really run for us. We've played it for 20 years and we love that. Mm-hmm. We love his system, his game, and the way that, Levi does all this stuff. It's still very, very centric to us. So it doesn't have the player viewer input the same way that we're doing with some of these other games that we run. My Zweihander game had the ability for players to buy fortune and misfortune to screw with the players or GM. And you're doing this now with Pathfinder. So, it's definitely we're going to include those things, just probably not for Everstorm for that very reason.
Yeah, some of the chat we're getting here as well. So Levi's saying even in his own game, he would restrict that table. Okay. For his game, he put a time window on things. And that is something I have talked about. So we discussed this at the end of last game, is that some of those effects, I'm going to start having some rolls to see if you can undo some of them over time. But it's in the game, it's been a freaking day. These guys haven't even spent a day yet. So there are some things like that I think will make the game more... or the wild effects more tolerable if they survive. And then Mouse is saying, the other thing that goes into running your own world is when you put together a really interesting challenge and then the players just roll so well that it's not a challenge anymore. And, losing the feeling of achievement, I guess, at that point. It is a very challenging thing when any kind of randomization that gets into the game creates a possibility that it doesn't go the way you want it to go. And that's just the nature of it.
when he's talking about having a lot of good rolls, though, I think he's just talking about the standard like attack rolls, the standard, successes that make a challenge suddenly seem like it's not a challenge anymore. Yeah. But usually in those situations, the good part of it is you as the DM or GM might be kind of sad that thing's not challenging like you'd hoped it would be. But usually whenever players come in and they have, just total steamroll like rolls, they're usually not too disappointed by it. So at least they're having a good time. So
yeah, if they're having a good time, that's great.
That's the most important thing. So at least in those situations when they're steamrolling, what's hard is the other way around. When you're in a situation like how my Zweihander game ended, where it was like, there's not even another session to make up for this shit today. Like, this is the end. Like, I hope everyone's having a good time because your rolls are crap and you keep failing. Like, so, there's no way to throw a bone at that point.
That's true. Yeah.
So there's a little difference. If they come in and they steamroll it, then it was easy peasy, but at least everyone usually feels good about it when they're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, all you have to say about the roll is Tucker's Kobolds.
That's a reference I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I don't know that one either. It's somewhere in there we should know about. Maybe we'll get a reference to that later. But yeah, so it's interesting. There are ways to kind of deal with things after the fact. So that's kind of what I'm doing with this. And I'm not saying I necessarily have the correct answer of how to do this. But the thing that goes on, though, in these game sessions is that when the unexpected happens, as a DM, you have to figure it out. So you have to have some tools in your box to kind of come at it. You have to kind of know what you're willing to tolerate, I think, is one thing, like how swingy the situation can be. So in this case, I know I don't want it to be a total party kill just because of one roll. Like, that's not fun. So I know that I want to at least give you guys some opportunities to deal with the situation that's playing out, similar to how we dealt with the door. So one of the earlier wild effects that occurred was that it said one of the nearest doors to you opens up to outside D10 miles into the sky. So I was like, all right, well, there's 2 doors in this room. I'll hit Levi roll. We'll see which one it affects. So of course it affects the one that goes to the next room that they need to go through. And then I was like, okay, well, roll the distance. It's 3 miles. I'm like, okay. So of course this happens, and there's only one way to go. It's not like they have a choice of where to go. So they have to go through this door that will drop them 3 miles out of the sky. So like, I could have just left it there. I could have just said, okay, sorry guys, game over. You have to find another way to solve this investigation that the module did not expect. But what I decided to do instead was to give them an out. So in the game, if you go back and watch it, you'll see I give them an intelligence check and I give them a hint. And I say, okay, well, the magic seems to be limited to the actual door, not to the hallway.
Right.
And so what do the players do with it? Well, now they make some choices and they decide we're going to pry the door off the wall here and, break the hinges off so it falls. Okay. Well, that maintains the spirit of the wild magic. Now I have this door that opens 3 miles over this house that I'm sure they'll use later on to do something else completely unexpected I'll have to deal with. But they, get to progress through the dungeon now. And I feel like that at least feels kind of clever, that they have some choice in it. It still feels like it was impactful. So it wasn't just like haha, that effect doesn't happen. Yeah, Levi says he's going back for that door. Yeah, absolutely. So like, I think that's an important bit to it. So like with this earthquake, I've got some ideas, but I'd be interested in seeing, like, Dustin, how would you personally decide to deal with this earthquake scenario?
Well, Jeff, I would love to tell you that I was listening to everything you just said, but somebody sent me an article on Tucker's Kobolds, and this thing is fucking fantastic. So I just linked it in the chat. Thank you, Alice, for sending that, and thank you, Canadian Wolverine, for bringing it up. But it's some high-level, super badass kobolds that this guy used in a story to just completely scare the shit out of his party. So every time these kobolds show up, the party just freaks out and tries to run from them. They're like the most badass kobolds ever. So click on that link, you can read the story. It's fantastic. But to get back, I did hear actually what you were saying. I was just joking.
Okay, it's a good joke.
What I would do, what I would do in these situations, I know you're talking a bit about like the door with the sky on the other end, right? So you gave a hint about like that it's just the doorway, that it's not, my character had like no ability to really deal with that. So, luckily we got a spicy Mike with a T-square who can come over and take the door off the hinges, and that was kind of the nice workaround for it. What I have a problem with though is like, it's cool, but at the same time, like, it's really hard to validate that player cost, because when we're dealing with currencies, and for those of you maybe who are just joining us for a first time, down at the bottom of the screen there, you can see you can collect cams, and you can convert your cams into even better cams. Or did you rename them Techno Power Pan Points already?
They're Techno Power Pan.
They're now Techno Power Pan Points. And if you convert your cams into Techno Power Pan Points, you can spend them to have effects on his Pathfinder game on Wednesday nights. So, but because this is a commodity that viewers are rewarded for watching our shows, whether you're here on the Wisdom Check, you're here for Bardic Knowledge, you're gaining those cams that you can convert, you have to honor the outcome to a degree. And I know that like Animal G and Air Laser, who are kind of the two primary wild magic boosters that we've had so far through the first 3 or 4 sessions, I know that they're both pretty cool with, whatever happens kind of happens out of it, because they don't know either. But you got to make sure that they feel like they got their currency worth.
Right.
So it's you got to have it be a hurdle, but you don't want to too cheesily work around it either. So that it becomes like an actual thing, or else they don't feel like it's worth spending their currency on any further.
Yeah, that's why that door is still existent. So like,
right,
it is there to be used again in the future potentially. So that brings us to the earthquake again, where
so then the earthquake is now a different scenario. We got this large electric serpent in the water, and we have, because we're using a map. This is Theater of the Mind. It's a little different story, but because we're using a map, this earthquake happens. There's a couple of really good points there where you could block off the entrances. But it would kind of screw Dig Bungle a lot. Yeah. So you could faction off Dig Bungle from the party at this point with a cave in that would force us back out of the hole the other way to have to come back at a later time. But that's just Dig Bungle being left out to dry. Right. Which, okay, let's say that Levi's down with that, and he says he is, and that's fine. Player consequences, so be it, right? Well, now we just lost our wild magic and a character that the fans are having a fun time interacting with, and we just took away that player interactivity that we wanted to have in this game. So a lot of that still is rested firmly upon the shoulders of Dig Bungle. So unless we're going to bring in a wild mage or another wild cleric, like, it was cool for 3 games, let's throw it out, we're not going to use it anymore. Like, that's not cool either. That's not what we want either. So I don't feel like that's the answer. So I feel like the better answer is that this earthquake doesn't necessarily happen instantly. We got another round where we get in there to try to help Dig Bungle. Earthquake happens. And now we're stuck in a room with this serpent, and we have to deal with the consequences of the fact that we didn't rest and get our spells back. That's on us. Yeah. Even if the earthquake didn't happen, that was still going to be the case. So we're not dealing with anything other than we have no escape route that has been caused by the earthquake. So it has an effect on this story because we can't flee from this thing. We have to confront it. And we deal with our own player actions at that point. And then if we die, we die.
Yeah. And that is kind of going in the direction I was thinking. Like, my idea was originally, I did come across the idea of sealing you guys in, but I felt like it slows down progression more than it adds to it. So I might still do the behind you guys, that the way you came is now sealed off, and I think that'll be fine. But I want to also probably inject something that's a little bit active in the scene. So I think I'm going to have like small like rock drops and stuff like that. Yeah,
falling rocks makes sense.
Yeah, having that, maybe having you guys have to make an acrobatics check to maintain your balance. In this case, Dig Bungle's got a dwarven feature that'll be handy for that, so that'll be a chance to use it. Things that will complicate things. Maybe people are if they roll too low, maybe they're penalized on their to hit rolls or something like that.
I think anything that you do in the room that you want to make a static effect of the earthquake, as long as it affects this electric serpent also.
Mm-hmm.
If the serpent has to make its reflex saves to not get crushed by a falling rock every round as well, like we're all making reflex saves, including the monsters. Like now it's a global effect that may help us, may hurt us, depending on how rolls go. If it's based around a reflex or something, at least then, well, that's how you built your character. If your reflex score sucks, that's at least it's based on how you built, because you had that opportunity to do that in this system. So,
and I think that's an important aspect is that you want to make sure that players have multiple avenues to deal with the scenario that play.
Right.
So, like anything I'm going to add, I want to make sure. Thank you, Poison Ivy, for the bits. Yeah, I want to add the ability for players to be creative, to utilize what's going on, perhaps to their advantage if they're successful, or to have consequences if they're not. And so that's something I'm thinking about of how to do. I've got some ideas kind of percolating around that I hope you guys will be able to interact with in a way that's meaningful and interesting. And hopefully the chat will agree is a welcome addition to the scene. So we'll see how it plays out. Luckily, we cliffhangered, so I had time to figure this out.
Luckily, it happened at the end of the night.
Because, man, if this would have happened in the middle, I'd just been like, shit. Because sometimes when you make a decision on the spot, it isn't fully thought out and the ramifications of it, and then it can spiral out pretty quick. I would say that happens more often than not. So you have to have these kind of things kind of turning in your head at all times. Like, what are the conditions that are important here? What do I need to stress to make sure this scene feels good to everyone involved?
Right.
And, how do we make sure that players who weren't part of the risk-taking endeavor that created the circumstance don't feel completely dicked over? I think that's the tricky one in this case.
Canadian Wolverine asked, do any of the characters have knowledge of the underground or spells to do, like pass walls, move earth, stone shape? And the answer to all that is no, no, and no.
Knowledge of the underground, our dwarf Dig Bungle has, but they're all level 1 characters.
But not this cavern specifically.
No.
I mean, he's a dwarf, so he understands how underground works, but you don't have to be much of a dwarf to understand how this cavern functions. Like, it's a cavern, natural one, and it's an earthquake. I don't know how much of a dwarf you got to be to figure that part out, but we're all level 1, so some of those bigger spells, like what you're talking about, we're also playing Pathfinder 2nd edition. So because of that, things like pass walls, move earth, all that is going to be higher level stuff we're not to yet.
Yeah, and to make this even more uncomfortable for the party, as Justin was saying before, they, for some reason, haven't slept in 4 game sessions, and it's all the same night as the first game. So they were completely out of spells.
Quite a bit. I took a nap. I'm good to go.
Yeah, you did take a nap, so if people end up with exhaustion. You will not. But yeah, they had already expended all their first level spells that they had in the first night of the game sessions. And so they went into this endeavor here completely empty. Some of them already had damage on them. And they set off every trap that was in the place on themselves. Then a very minor fight that was just supposed to be like a speed bump took a serious bite out of one of the players. And now they find themselves, they split the party, and one of the players went solo into this encounter and promptly got dropped. And that's their cleric. So,
luckily we have kind of a backup cleric who's not a cleric.
Yeah. So it basically everything that could go wrong to this party went wrong. And then a wild effect occurred on top of it to just compound the wrongness that was happening to them. And this isn't even the boss fight yet. They're on the mini boss of the dungeon. So
yeah, it's gonna get worse.
Yeah, I've been before the game session. I was looking at, I mapped out all the things, and I was like, okay, well, if they play well, if they're within reasonable rolls, this is going to be a very tough series of fights in the last 2. But I think they'll make it. They'll do it. And then as the night went, I went, they're not going to make it. There's no way they're going to make it through this. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Oh man. Let's see, what are you saying in the chat here?
Levi's is reasonable.
Reasonable.
Yeah, so it is a situation where, like, I think sometimes because we're very experienced gamers, we will put ourselves in extremely compromised situations. Like, I do it with Bowron all the time.
Yeah, you do. I want to take just a second here to acknowledge that Abducted Gaming just followed us. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Welcome.
Coming and checking us out tonight.
Yeah, Ballrin.
Yeah, Velik.
Oh, nice.
Velik is part of Smart Gamer Network. My friend Zaylen there, him and Malice are also a part of that, and he's going to actually be doing running some tabletop role-playing game stuff over on Smart Gamer Live, which
sweet.
They are traditionally a video game oriented channel that I have appeared on a couple of times. Zaylen's asked me to be on there, and I have for their town hall, but they're also going to be starting to do some tabletop role-playing game stuff. So excited to see how that works out for them. So thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you check out the Discord. If you're not already on there, pop on in. We got a lot of people in there. We chat about all kinds of stuff. We talk about topics like this. We talk about people's games. We allow promotion in there, all that kind of stuff. So if you got something you want to share, that's where you go. But yeah, you were saying with putting yourself in compromised positions.
Yeah, I mean, I do that a lot.
Yeah, you do.
and we talk a lot about 5th edition, the pros and cons of 5th edition. The pros and cons of 5th edition is that it doesn't take you very long to realize what you can get away with in 5th edition. Your pool of hit points gets so big, you got enough wild shapes, you got your spells at your back, like we were talking about the difference between it and like Dungeon Crawl Classics, where those things are guarantees, far more guarantees than they are in Dungeon Crawl Classics, like for spell systems. So I know what I can get away with Bowron to a degree, and I push the limits on that all the time.
Yeah. You deplete the rest of our resources admirably.
and sometimes it's true. Like just completely deciding not to pray for spells for 2 days. Like it's just what to do sometimes. But so there's a lot of situations you could throw yourself into with Pathfinder. I think that because we're used to kind of being experienced players who can handle those situations, I think that we didn't realize how deep this rabbit hole was going when we started down it.
Yeah.
And what seemed like the Gilligan's Island sort of like 3-hour tour has turned into like the all-night affair. So I don't think we realized we were like heading towards like end of the module level stuff here. Like we were kind of like, hey, we'll go find out what happened, and then we'll go to bed, and then we'll go deal with the real problem somewhere else, right? Like, but no, we went into this house, and we may not come back out.
Yeah, so the setup to this event, the party comes into town riding on a wagon with a group of travelers, and one of them is like the caravan leader, and they're supposed to get to know him and like him and stuff, whatever. And they get to town, it's this like podunk nothing town, little village, and they have a little celebratory dinner after they just vanquished a bunch of nasty, abnormal, mutated wolves on the roadway. And during this event, a bar fight erupts, some chaos goes across, and then once they all situate and settle all this down, the caravan leader turns out to be poisoned, and it turns into a whodunit kind of situation. So the party's been kind of going around trying to find clues, trying to figure out why their buddy on this thing was killed and who did it. And the module assumes that you guys are going to spend weeks doing random side scenes and investigations. That you're going to go to people's houses individually and deal with whatever's going on at that house, and then figure out whatever little tidbit of info they have. But my guys, as they are, always do something that modules don't expect, and they're like, "No, we're just going to have everyone come here, and we're going to do it right now, and then we're going to go."
Is it really that abnormal? Do you think?
I don't know. I don't know.
I feel like most game groups are pretty direct. Like, and maybe the more old school you are, the more direct you are about it. Like I play in a Zweihander game on the Zweihander channel that Matt runs, Matt Shaw runs, and we have a guy in there, Mike, who's he OSG out there behind his name. He's an old school gamer, but he's very that way. Like the moment we hit a plot, like the moment he sniffs plot, it's like boom, we're on it. you knock things out in order. This is the order you do things, and boom, you get through the situation. We move on down the story. Like, the people that once they get a sense of those rails, boom, they can hit those rails and they know where to run. And so I feel like that's most game groups, though, is that they come in with that sort of like knock this thing out sort of mentality.
It may be. I don't know. I've definitely gamed with other groups where it felt like it's just tangential, like constantly, just everything goes off the sides. They take their time. Because I'm not sure if there were any. I'm trying to think back to how I described things. And I don't think I described anything as time sensitive in terms of the investigation. And so I think there is, at least on my part, a little bit of, it was a little unexpected that you guys didn't sleep on it and then come at it fresh in the morning.
Well, no one was more caught by surprise than me, because I role played my character taking his ass to bed, and then I had to honor it for about an hour and a half. So nobody was more surprised than me when everyone else decided they weren't going to bed after I went to bed. And I was like, well, at some point, I guess I'll have my character get back up, because this is clearly all going to go on without me at this point. So
that was real strange. So I didn't expect that. I thought maybe they would be like, I'll have a quick conversation, then we'll go to bed, right? And
that's what I thought at first too. So
and then of course it turns into something more. And what the module assumes that they're going to go to the farmer's farmhouse to find them, and then deal with whatever nonsense is going on over there. In this case, it was like a wild boar was going to be chasing somebody around. You got to help them, and it's a pretty nasty fight. Or another one where you go to, instead of speaking to the cook at the restaurant, you're supposed to go to her house, and she had a bunch of these trees that had like killer bees nests in them and stuff that you had to deal with. And then there's like something else you could deal with that was like essentially, like doing a tour of the town to get a piece of information. But all these assumed that you were going to be there for like multiple days. Being like, well, today I did one thing, and that one thing was talk to Amora.
I have a couple comments. First, this is just a side comment. But it sounds like this module is written like the beginning of a Legend of Zelda game, where you're in Little Hyrule, and it's like, go help this poor lady with her bees, and go over there and run away from the boar. Like it sounds like crap you'd be doing like at the beginning, like tutorial level of like a Legend of Zelda game. Like we always
Which is why I thought it would be an all right game for the first time we played Pathfinder, but
right. So and there may be a lot of groups that's exactly what they go do. Like, and to a degree, like having little things like that kind of help build more character for the town itself. Which I think because maybe we didn't do some of those things, like we're kind of lacking some of that, like give a damn about this town.
You definitely do not care about anything in this town with this module.
So I think that's maybe fair to say.
1,000%.
I think some of our other problem perhaps is that sometimes I think when game sessions are broken up and you wait a week before you play again, you forget that it's the same day. Even though we talk about it, you're fresh, you're ready to go. And so you're ready to hit the ground running, and you don't want to get into a game and immediately be like, and we go to bed. Like,
right.
So even though it's going to get hand waved and you're going to start out the next morning, like, I feel like maybe that's kind of where we fell victim to, was like by game 3, we forgot we're still on the same day. And we just kept going.
Yeah, Malice says it's why he doesn't do modules, because they're written with expectations. Those expectations are never what the party does.
And we typically are those people as well. You are amongst your own here normally. But
yeah. I love what the closed captioning is doing. It's saying things like something about the Ozarks in the last one. That was great.
That's a great show, too. You should watch it.
Yeah. But it is fascinating. I mean, obviously, we know each other pretty well. And I don't know if it's always been this way, but it seems like in the last few years, we've definitely been going more and more towards these neutral kind of morally dubious kind of characters. We've gotten away from the heroic trope.
You speak for yourself, my friend. I've been dubious for decades. I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
fair, but like I think back to our characters, and like as a group, I don't know that we've really done a lot of like the pure good guy elements. And so every time we hit a plot, it's like, do I care? Is there something in it for me? Wouldn't it be easier if I just said fuck it and leave?
I think of it more as, I think that as we've gotten more, I don't want to use the word advanced, but as we've continued to role play for longer and longer, I think that what we've done is we've started to hone in on more of our characters to have a bit more, I don't want to say the word edge. That's kind of got more of a 90s like Cloud Strife sort of thing to it. And that's not where we go. That's not our characters at all. But I think more of a grounded, like rounded realism. Like Bowron has just standard personality problems. Like it isn't plot problems that Bowron has. It's personality problems. Like the plot problems just complicated by his personal problems. So like he has those things built into him that don't even always have a mechanic. Clashius has problems. They're not plot problems. They're just personality problems because those become more relatable characters usually when you find them in other media, the TVs, the movies, the films. Those are the characters that in a way you gravitate towards to a way because they seem more real than Superman. So like they have to work really hard to make Superman interesting. They have to make him more human to make him interesting. So and I have a lot of personality problems. I mean, this is just the truth. I don't hide. Well,
the first thing Malice said here was that Vampire Masquerade players, Dustin and I, and Malice, don't know what good guys are. I think that's probably true. We got a lot of experience role playing in times where morally complicated was the shtick, you know.
And to be fair, and I was talking about this with somebody else completely separate, the 90s was like anti-hero central.
Yeah.
You could not have asked for a decade that was more based around anti-heroes. And if you think about the 90s in reflection, there was bad things going on in society, but typically you think of the 90s as still being a fairly good era. Economy was up and booming, that life was pretty good. With the exception of, some certain populations that still didn't have very good at that point in time. But the overall impression in the 90s was that things were good. So you had all of your characters that were the people were gravitating to was your Cloud Strifes, your Wolverines. Exactly. Wolverine was, huge. Hugh Jackman took that role, made it huge. It was the gruff, doesn't play by the rules anti-hero was the thing to be, right?
I like the Canadian Wolverine can't say Spawn without proceeding it with
Spawn. Exactly. So, those were the characters that were the most popular for people in that era. And that was a very formative time for us. And Vampire the Masquerade fit right into that. Yep. So now you move to 5th edition coming out in 2014. Let's just say the world's a little different. I think why 5e is so popular now is people want heroes again. The Avengers, the way Marvel's played into that, I think has been huge. But like, there's a swing. Your Wolverine is not the guy who everyone's flocking towards in the MCU. Tony Stark. No,
now it's Deadpool.
Well, that's a whole. He's just now getting there though. But even he's the hero in that story. Like,
well, that's true. But you also have like Tony Stark, who through any arc he ends up coming across as a hero. But Tony Stark is always kind of a gray area anti-hero.
Marvel's more gray area with their heroes to begin with. But you're seeing this pull of they're not running through the same kind of arcs. Like at the end of the day, Tony Stark, fucking spoilers for Endgame if you ain't seen that shit by now, he overcomes his issues to become that hero who martyrs himself at the very end, and it becomes like this symbol of heroism after starting as the guy who was drunk on the back of a Humvee that got hit, literally 10 years ago in our lives. So
true.
Saying it's been a long journey, right? Because Iron Man was 2004, I think it was, and that was coming right out of the 90s where we had that period of anti-heroism. Those were the characters people flocked to. So of course Iron Man's the first one out the gate. Like he's a broken, damaged individual. So, but his arc has gone the other direction over time. And I think that reflects very heavily with players and their interaction with the world and what they're looking for out of the world. So
so maybe that has affected us a lot more than we think.
I think so.
I know that we as players in our Dungeons & Dragons games tend to like look at that like paladin, good guy, pure good, take care of the little guy, jump to every problem that every villager has and say, not for me, And we've also tried the evil trope, and that also doesn't work for us. So like we've always kind of gravitated towards that like chaotic good, neutral area as a group, not as individuals. But
no one's played more paladins than me.
That's true.
Like, say what you want to. Like, I have a lot of characters who are very gray in their nature, but I've also been the guy who's probably played the most lawful good characters, probably historically as well. So, I think my characters that I played my early paladins were very much the hero, big good guy. I put some darker spins on some of them over time, but I've hit those tropes as well. So, I'm probably due to go back that direction at some point.
Yeah, I originally started off my current 5e character thinking that was the way I was going to go. But when I hit the party, I realized it's going to clash too much and be more disruptive than beneficial. So I changed a little bit.
Kind of Bowron's rubbing off on all of you. Slowly you've all become what Bowron's wanted, like, over time. Like,
yeah, I mean, a lot of our groups ended up being more of the, like, what's in it for me? What makes me look cool? What do I want to do next? Don't care what you guys are doing kind of types. And the pure-hearted good guy, I think the closest thing we probably have to is Fulcrum. And so because of that,
originally,
Wrighton was definitely original.
Wrighton was
like
that
100%
guy for us.
Yeah.
And now we have a Kodo who is maybe not as, like, in some ways he's stronger in that sense, in other ways he's not. But
he's more rigid, but I don't think he's more good. He's more lawful. That's
good. Exactly what I'm saying. Like, he's not as good as Wrighton was, like, personality wise, but he has a harder line in the sand that he won't cross. Like,
yeah, and so I think that shapes the way we interact with plots, and I think that is probably largely why modules are going to always spin out in an unexpected direction for us, because we don't approach them the way that the average random party is expected to behave.
And that was why I had some concerns for us heading into DCC. Because this was like a module to end all modules, and I'm like, you guys, this is not in our wheelhouse.
But there wasn't a role playing issue there. It was
no.
It was a stylistic choice that was different,
right? It was just a matter of the habits of dungeon delvers. Is a little different than the habits of role players when they attack. Like, Levi had no problem running up there with Dig Bungle and just flinging open that door. In a standard DCC group, that door was not. No one was touching that door till the thief looked at it. Like, there's just no way. So, like I said, we don't have those habits. So,
well, I think we also have a tendency to want to have, like you described before, complications, because I think when you've played long enough, you've had enough experiences where you did all the right moves and you had success and you got that benefit of feeling like, I did it right, I overcame it. And then after a while, that gets old. And so, like, then the next thing is, can I up the ante? Can I play to my character to such a degree that it's actually an impediment to me, and yet I could still survive and succeed?
Yeah.
Let's try that. And obviously you do that a lot.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I think some of us have been, doing some of those things here and there. I think it's a more interesting thing. I think it may be more complicated to run from a DM side of things, maybe less so from a storyteller vibe, but from a dungeon master vibe, I think that is a lot harder to deal with.
If you were talking in like a pure mechanic sense, like balancing a fight or anything like that.
Yeah, figuring out what you expect the players to do, what's coming next. If you're a real plotter, I think that would be a lot more challenging to deal with.
I'm going to say this in like the most loving way I possibly can, but I'm not sure Levi accounts for any of that when he makes an encounter. I think he just puts his encounter out there and he just goes with it. And I don't think.
No, I think he knows that we're murder hobos.
Like, I don't think he accounts for that at all. So I think what I do with Bowron works perfectly fine in a Levi game because Levi's not accounting for it either way. So.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that from a storytelling position, if you are approaching running the game as a storyteller, as opposed to a dungeon master, what the characters do and what happens from the story is what you're manipulating most. And so what goes on there is something you're focused on. like that's place number one for you. And whenever you approach the game, whereas I think for people who are designing like, oh, okay, I'm making a dungeon. Here's the plot, you go into the city and you meet X, Y, and Z, and here's the people that are needing help. And this is what they're about. When players suddenly start throwing in these quirky characters in, suddenly that doesn't work. And that's a lot harder for those types.
Yeah, I guess it can be. I think if you're talking about modules in general, they don't account for a lot of that. And we've talked about this, I know several times on this show, that there's always in modules this like over assumption that the party knows each other, the party gets along, the party's well balanced, and that the party is going to care about every NPC they come across until they really get their hooks in the story. And that's just not always true with our group.
True.
So,
hey, Zombie Toast, have a nice sleep. See you later. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.
If you find out what sleep is like, come Wednesday and tell our characters about it, because we don't know. So,
no, thanks for coming. We're a weird group at this point for modules of the beginner variety. Like I specifically picked this one because I thought that it was going to have a lot of elements that would showcase what's going on within the system and be an easy introduction. I assumed that it would be mostly balanced around the expectations of the game and give us kind of a taste of what we were doing. And it would be easy prep because all the dungeons are already made up and, the plot's there. Obviously for us, it's a harder thing to hook our players with these sorts of plots, I guess, and the way that they're structured and laid out.
It's a hook that does not have a lot of worm on it.
Yep.
And
the more we get into it, the more apparent that is. And that's not a knock on the module in terms of its target audience. Because I think if you're new to gaming and you came in with the expectation of you're coming into a game, you don't know anything about characters, you're coming in, you're saying, okay, let's make a intro thing for them to deal with that's kind of relatable, and let's go. I think this does a good job of being kind of that tutorial game. Yeah,
like I said, the beginning of a Legend of Zelda game, right? There's some slapstick funny stuff like running away from a boar or dealing with bees, which might, in some games, like if you're playing 5e, like bees is a good chance to learn how swarm rules work. Chase scenes are cool if you have a system with chase scenes. So like somewhere you're running away from a boar, like these are fine in game systems that have those mechanics built in. Pathfinder's kind of like D&D though. Like those are not its strengths. So like it's interesting that that's what they put in some of those, because clearly it's a kill the boar and kill the bees situation at that point. So, so you're not dealing with like other quirky systems to teach different mechanics. It's here's some combat. Learn how your spells work. Right.
Maybe Pennywise daycare. Good night.
Yeah,
thanks for stopping by. I know we're up late. It seems like a couple of intro combats to get people maybe used to combat systems. Could be
maybe a skill feat if you want to try to use some kind of handle animal or something for the bees or the boar. Like you could attempt a skill feat or something in there, perhaps if you have a right kind of character, a druid or a ranger.
They have some of those built into it. Yeah.
So there's probably other systems there that allow you to feel the difference between, do we want to kill it or do we want to skill manipulate it? I personally really feel like with this new skill system that they really should have been highlighting that more than what they've done. With this module, based on my as a player going into it, I would have liked to have seen more skills, just because I think the way skills are done is more interesting now than what I've seen in 5e or any other version of Pathfinder to this point.
Yeah, I think they do a really good job within Pathfinder 2e. And those are some things that were built into those side scenes that you guys haven't done. There are a few things in there that were kind of interesting roles, but they weren't like super like this is a learn about this mechanic kind of thing. There just happens to be some things tossed out there here and there. Like you were describing the boar thing, there were things you can do with skills to deal with that. With the bees, there was a number of skill things you could do to figure out how to deal with that. Nature roles to know about smoke and clever crafting to come up with a way of like making a, bee suit or something or whatever. I don't remember the specifics on, but there were some examples of ways you could tackle that weren't, I hit it with my stick.
Right. Yeah.
And some of that was built around I think the way they laid it out was designed to build some rapport with these otherwise neutral at best NPCs. Like, oh, you helped me, so now I'll spill the beans, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It was like an invitation to sit down and talk to them.
Right. And there is some interesting, even in those situations, like I'm running Bitter Harvest, which is they call them like an adventure path, I think, but it's the one in the back of the core rulebook for Zweihander. So I'm running it with a group off stream, and I really, really wish I was streaming it because they're doing such a fantastic
It's been going
job.
well.
Like, yeah, I really wish I was streaming it, but maybe I'll do Bitter Harvest on stream sometime in the future. And because now that I got all the maps and everything made in Roll20, it's ready to go. I don't have to really do all the work.
Yeah, that's a big plus.
That helps a lot. But it's a situation where it's a module that does a lot of the same things, kind of like your module does at the beginning, right? Like you're in this town, you meet these NPCs, and it's interesting though because it does have some of these other systems. So like it intentionally puts in a chase scene in there, and it intentionally puts in some of these other things to have you deal with those systems, so that you can tell that it's built to be a little bit of a teaching module. Like it intentionally is like, here's a chase scene that you can opt to be in or not be in. Like and you have these ways of like roping players kind of into them, so that these other kind of things come up, and it's not just roll investigation 500 times, because that's what players do. If left to their own devices, they will never mess with other systems except investigation and killing. So
perception, find the thing to kill. Kill it.
Right.
Yeah.
Perception, find something to kill. Now let's kill it. And they will rinse repeat that if you don't give them other outlets. So it's been interesting to see how, because of our experiences with Pathfinder, how it has affected my approach to how I was going to do a Bitter Harvest this time around. And I can see already where I'm making deliberate choices that have paid off just based on that player experience with Pathfinder.
That's cool. So like, are they mechanical things you're choosing to do, or are they just...
No, because the mechanics are built into the system. I can't do anything about that. But the way that I approach the party with NPCs, and the way that I have the NPCs interact with the party, in order to build some levels of camaraderie and some other things that I feel like the Pathfinder 2e module kind of glosses over at the beginning. I realized like I could gloss over it just as easily with a Bitter Harvest and make those same mistakes. So I spent far more time and energy in that early part forcing situations where they have to deal with these NPCs a bit more, and like get some of the dirt on them and get some of the grime on them, and let them really feel who these people are before they take off towards the story. So and because it gives me that opportunity to do so there. But when I ran Bitter Harvest at the game shop the first time around in person with people, I kind of glossed over it a bit, and the characters didn't care about these other people at all. They got to the town where the story takes place, and they didn't care about any of it. They spent their whole time deciding they were going to create political uprisings and other shit that just like tore the whole town apart and all this other stuff. Like they didn't care.
That's so random.
Right. So this time going in, I was like, clearly I have to focus more on getting these players to enjoy these NPCs. So I got to do more setup. And so it's been interesting. Did you spend like
an entire session on setup?
A whole session. They spent the whole session, like basically the last thing they did was go out on the road. Like that was
wow. Well, I'm wondering if you guys would have tolerated that if I had done that with our module.
Normally, I would say no.
That's what I was thinking.
But
that's why I didn't do it.
After watching some of the more recent Everstorm episodes, like it's Soraka Blaze, and watching some of just our interactions, like in the bar scene and everything else, like I think I don't know if it's a year and a half of streaming our games and crowd interaction, and maybe getting a chance to go back and watch our games as like a viewer, like to go back and watch them. I think that like we have adapted our play style a bit more than maybe what we even think of. Like, I think we play a little differently than we did 2 years ago.
In what way?
I think that we're more comfortable sitting in a scene and dealing with NPCs and not pushing a plot agenda.
Interesting.
More so than I would have thought our group would be.
Because see, I would say a year ago in the same campaign, we were definitely not doing that. We were definitely like, there's an urgency to go and do something because we have an audience that we need to entertain. And the fear that, a side scene that bogs down, which obviously in retrospect are more interesting to watch. We kind of had the feeling, at least I did at the beginning, of like, oh, we need to move things along to keep the pacing going. So it is interesting because there is a difference now. I do feel it.
There is.
And Mouse is right. You have to LARP more and stream.
And to a degree, that is kind of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It is more that way, but like we're going into this next session and it could be an entire 2 to 3 hours of just a role play scene at dinner with these other skeezers. Like,
I think it could be pretty interesting. There's tension there.
Right. And I think that our group is more accepting of that than we were a couple of years ago, where the expectation was an hour of role play and then a battle before we were done. And me and Clint were getting back in the car to drive 3 hours home. Like, or, it always we always kind of, I think there was always that pressure to feel like there needed to be a conflict in there as well. And I think we're more comfortable, with these sessions, the way that we play them now, just sitting in those situations and just dealing with them more so than we had been in previous campaigns.
That's an interesting comment from Canadian Wolverine. They're saying, I think streaming benefits from being like tabletop simulator. Some visual production helps a viewer other than watching the reactions of the players or how they take on to the dialogue.
Visually,
what do you mean by that?
I think what they mean is being able to see things like and Clint, who does our overlays, does a fantastic job of all of that. Levi now, who's doing the art, like we have actual DM drawn and colored art on our overlays that like represent the character tokens, that represent the characters on the overlay. So you're getting a more true visual representation of what the characters look like. We have the maps that Levi spends so much time on photoshopping his maps. They're all unique to what he does. They're not taken from anywhere else. Like it's his own maps.
We promptly walk off them.
Sometimes we do promptly or hug the edge of. I find that we're edge huggers.
Always
like, us on the edge, and we never leave the edge. Like that's just something we do. But
I see. Okay, so you're talking about actual battle maps and minis and stuff. That would be awesome if we were in person. If we were sitting at an actual table together instead of in our garage or in our spare room, hundreds of miles apart from each other, that would be fantastic. And I gotta miss those days. But yeah, I mean, I think there are some things that definitely are beneficial since we are focusing on visuals. We're streaming video content. I think it's important to have interesting visuals, something that's dynamic in some way. I think as we're adding music and stuff, I think that's going to help because, you as a viewer, I imagine some of you guys aren't paying it as much attention as maybe some of the players are. Maybe you're tuning in while you're, doing a chore or something. So maybe you miss a detail or the description of what's going on or whatever. And then you come in, you're like, well, I don't know what's happening. So maybe some of these visual and auditory elements maybe cover for that, so we don't have to constantly be reiterating, what the scene looks like.
Yeah, I think there is some level of truth to that. I think it was interesting, just even with this DCC module, seeing our group run it with full maps that I created versus the other 3 groups that did it Theater of the Mind.
Yeah, it felt different. Yeah,
it felt very different watching our game, and I don't know if it was an advantage or a disadvantage.
Yeah, hard to say.
It's hard to say. There'd be a really good somebody wanted to do like a real good case study. Like that would be an interesting one to see in what ways they thought having the maps were more or less help. But it is kind of a interesting thing though with Theater of the Mind, how that changes when you're a viewer. Like I watch a lot of streams that are 5 boxes with a fancy, pretty background that's not a map and no other visual aids.
And check out.
Sometimes you can't check out at all.
Right.
You can't check out at all. Like, you have to be paying attention or you have no clue what's going on, and you have no clue where they are, and you don't know the situation. Because if they're doing more role play, they're not taking time to recap anything when you get there.
Right.
So I think those situations for brand new people coming into a stream, I think the maps certainly are huge. They tell you a lot instantly without explanation.
Oh, Malice says he checks out because he's too out of sorts. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that, to kind of tie this back to where we were, we're looking at how our style is adjusted over the year relative to how do we approach scenes and characters in an unexpected way. We're dealing with the fact that, a year ago, if I would have sat down and said, hey, session 1, I'm going to have you just talking to this group of minor NPCs that have an importance to the plot, but are just random people, essentially, I think you guys wouldn't have gone for it. And I went into this kind of assuming that there wasn't enough meat on the bone with the descriptions I had to make that really fly for an episode. I definitely tried to do a lot more with the NPC than what the module presented.
Yeah,
but I don't think it really worked.
I think it didn't work.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty clear. And I know I was very cognitively aware of it between the first and second session. Because I think I even said to you, I'm going to have to fabricate a way to care about Blort. I was like, I'm going to have some sort of relationship between Blort and my former owner so that I have clashes as more of a reason to care that Blort just died.
Yeah, I guess the question then, though, is that because your character personality didn't care and wouldn't have cared no matter who this person was unless they had something in it for him? Or is it the module structuring that made it universal that nobody's going to care about this NPC?
I think that it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the personal character that I happen to have made, not knowing what this module was going into it when I made it, something like that was not something. He's a gladiator. People die around him all the time, sometimes at his own hands. So he's kind of callous in those sorts of ways. So I don't think for him it was going to be a big deal. I think for a character though, like Jasper Smoothhands, it would be a very big deal.
Potentially, yeah.
I think for Lug, maybe, there might
he would have cared either way.
I don't know if he would have cared at first, but he might care more that it was Finnick that was involved because it's a goblin. It might be something that, we can't, I kind of thought he might be one of those things we're going to blame the goblin. Are you serious?
That's what I thought.
Always blame the goblin.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be the goblin. But so there you go. Well, to a degree.
Yeah.
But he was more directly involved than when I said it. I thought it was not true. But then when I said it turned out it was kind of half true. So, I think there were ways there that those events could have roped characters in. Whereas there were other things just a random bar fight that's I don't understand why this is happening.
So the to peel back the fourth wall here, the module describes it as the players are supposed to know where all these random NPCs are, and then the bar fight is meant to be the obscure the situation so they don't necessarily remember with clarity when people left or what they were doing. So there's a plausibility that any particular NPC may or may not have been involved. I don't think it achieves that, but we also ended game before the bar fight. So you had an entire week for you to forget things to begin with. So it may have been unnecessary. I think if we were playing straight through, had the timing of that worked out differently, I think seeing everyone around, they're all interacting, I'm describing who they are and what they're doing, and then a bar fight happens, gives you that 30, 40, 50 minutes or whatever it happened to have been to have your mind somewhere else, and then NPCs do whatever they did. And now you have to think back oh, wait, where were they? Okay. Did I pay attention to them while they were doing X, Y, and Z? Not necessarily.
I guess my problem with it is like the bar fight starts between two characters that we hadn't met. So like these two characters get in the fight, and we're like over in the corner. Like I don't know if it's a positioning thing, but like maybe we needed to be somewhere closer to it when it starts. Like beer gets spilt on or splashed over onto one of our characters, so like now we're drawn into it. I felt like we were like over in the corner and the fight was taking place, and we're just like, well, I guess we'll go get involved because that's clearly what's supposed to happen here. Like again, we're hugging the corner of the map, right? Like
so well, the module assumes that your guys are gonna be heroes and be like, guys, calm down, you know?
Right,
and then you're gonna see the waitress get hit with the bottle, and you go, oh, that's gotten out of hand. Let's stop this.
Right,
and you guys are like, cool, she got slashed, awesome. Hey, I'm gonna punch that guy. Who's the guy I can hit hardest? And you're like, okay.
maybe I'm pulling from too much real life experience where I've seen fights happen at bars when I'm about my fraternity brothers. But like, if it ain't one of my guys in there, like I ain't in there, like fighter or not, you know, it's not my fight. So, I don't know.
So the structuring is, I think again, this falls back to the expectation of heroism and the expectation of direct involvement from players. Like that the default is going to be that you're going to do the good thing and you're going to do it right now. Yeah. And in our group, that doesn't work.
Always amazing when you're considering, and I know this is where we started Wisdom Check. We're going to get right back to day one. It always amazes me that modules are written that way for a system that clearly tells you there's 9 alignments. And then immediately wants to ignore half of them as though those are not options in their game. Like,
I mean, if you look back historically, though, they definitely made a large segment of those alignments unavailable to players.
In a lot of ways, yes, they did.
So, in theory, you were supposed to be a hero in the games, or occasionally not the hero, but still somebody who was hero adjacent. You know,
right?
Mouse is talking about. It's strange that modules position you to not just be extreme hero, but idiot hero. There's some things. I think it's the trope of the brash hero that charges into the face of danger because that's what heroes do. You know, like there's a dragon up there that nobody can deal with. Well, I can't really deal with it either, but somebody's got to try.
Yep.
You know, and our group isn't that group.
And that was immediately why Zweihander hit so well home for me, because I read Bitter Harvest. And when you read Bitter Harvest, and again, no spoilers in case I decide to run this on stream someday, you get to the end of the module and it's like, shit, like everybody's like crummy people. Like we have a choice to make, but like the real choice seems just like, let's just walk away, but it's not really an option either. So, you know, like that's what I love about it. That's what really hit home for me when I read that module. I was like, or when I watched that module played, I was like, this is exactly the kind of this is the system I want to get into. And I was like, because it does not assume that you're a bunch of heroes. It immediately tells you from the get-go, you're not a hero. You're a person that's about to have shit happen to them. Deal with it. And that is just that tonal difference immediately is what sold me on that system.
Yeah, I think some games definitely pitch a different tone. You know, like D&D, I think in its bones and in itself is you are heroes dealing with bad shit that's going on in the world. Right. You are the active ingredient that takes care of that problem. And I think with something like World of Darkness that we used to play a lot of, that's not the case with that. And you don't play that way. Exactly. And what you're describing there with that, or say something like Malice is talking about with Warhammer, Canadian Wolverine was also talking about Masquerade, Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, all these games come at it with a different expectation. And I think because of that, you kind of, I don't know, we obviously incorporated it into our normal gameplay experience, even in D&D, but it's fascinating. I don't know. It's weird how far we have kind of strayed from that D&D basic start, you know?
Well, and, I think that I played with a group that lived a few doors down from you and Cameron when you lived in Urbana, and they were still playing first edition D&D with the old school rules. but they had been a group that had been playing together for like 30 or 40 years, at that point in time. And it was fascinating to see how their group dynamic was, because they did have very much that old school gamer sort of crawl-like mentality to the way they approached problems and situations.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, their characters were far more flawed than I would have expected for people who were still holding on to that old school set of rules. They were very much more soap opera-y than I imagined. And it was kind of really weird to see people who were easily 10 years older than me running essentially D&D soap opera style game with occasional large scale combats in the middle. So it was interesting, I guess, that like you think that like this push for like real role play and stuff is like a newer thing with 5e, but it really does extend back. And
it's an individualistic thing. If your group is interested in those dynamics, you're going to put them in. Like if we're really interested in dungeons, we're going to have a lot more dungeons. If pick and locks and find a trap start game, you best believe every session is going to have them.
Right.
It's why for a long time, because we have some players that really love combat, we had a lot of combat. There are certain aspects we do and don't have in games as a result.
Yeah, and I guess their group is very homogenistic in their likes. Like they all did like the same thing. Whereas I think our group still is like we're a bit more varied amongst our 5 to 6 players as far as what parts of the game interest us the most and which ones are. Yeah, so it is there's a little give and take there that we have to play with that group didn't have to. So, but
I think that contributes to that unexpectedness of the game. I mean, it's expected in that we know each other fairly well, but it also is unexpected in how you hook things, right? Like what you got to do to get a game off the start. It's like I know if I was sitting down making a game from scratch, homebrew, that I would approach it very differently than what they did, just because I know I'm playing a game with you guys.
Right.
But I also thought I was going on a rope that would help you guys tie into that character, and it still didn't work. So
yeah. And some of it is you have to be good players and you have to recognize the hook and you have to just kind of bite it anyway. And that's like what I ended up doing, right? I was like, okay, I see the bear hook. They didn't really put Worm on the hook very well. Jeff tried to bait this thing up and dangle it in front of us as best we can, given this situation. But, clearly I have to contrive some more reasons why my character is going to care about this. And that's what I did between sessions.
Yep.
And then it immediately becomes like a non-issue after that. Like it was an issue for 5 seconds. And then it's a non-issue because then once you decide you care and you start down the path of investigating, well, now you're investigating. Like you're not going to walk away from it now. Like it mattered for like 5 whole seconds. Like,
yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think there's 1.5 million reasons to say why my character wouldn't do a thing.
Right.
But ultimately that doesn't help the game.
No.
And, you got to meet your DMs part way at some point, you know,
right.
How far along that path you have to go, I guess, is a story we could talk about. But I do think that as a player, there is a responsibility to participate, to some degree.
Yeah, and that's effectively what I realized I had to do to a degree. I was like, there's no good reason Classius would care about this unless I give him a reason I had not previously thought of before the event happened. Now, if it again, luckily, it happened at the end of a game session. That was the cliffhanger we left on. That happens first thing in a game. Like if that happens first, and it's like, well, that poor dwarf is dead. So what do you guys want to get for dinner? Like, what are you gonna do, right? Like my guy wouldn't care. But I had a week to think about it, so I was like, clearly this is a hook, and clearly we have to investigate his death. So I'm just gonna come up with a reason why I care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not like I could tell you ahead of time, hey guys, by the way, this whole plot contends on the fact that you care about this dwarf, so care about this dwarf. Yeah, like that's a weird contrivance I didn't want to get into. So I don't know. It definitely has some. I think there's some things to learn from it. I think that is a piece of it of content that we're putting on the channel. I think it is valuable to people. They get to see what does and doesn't work and how players deal with it or don't deal with it, how DMs deal with it and don't deal with it. So I'm happy with that. And we'll see how much more of this module we get through and how much I end up slicing and dropping on the editing floor. But
I'll tell you what, I know maybe I'm biased, but like going back and rewatching those episodes, because I did go back and rewatch them like on YouTube. I think that the module, for anyone who happens to stumble across them, whether intentionally or otherwise, the focus is going to be on the characters. Like the module is taking a clear back seat to the character acting, the voices, and the weird shit going on with Dig Bungle all the time. Like, I think that's where, like, I don't know how much people are going to learn, because there's so much of that going on all the time that I think maybe some of that'll get a little lost unless they watch it and then they happen to come across this episode. We're talking about it more directly, then maybe you put two and two together then. But or anyone who hears this and then goes and finds those episodes like in the reverse order, like can probably get more out of it that way. Or just hearing this talk about it might do more than actually the episode itself. So I think that there is, I think for those of us who experienced it, I think there's some good learning lessons there.
And I think we're approaching it in a different way in general, just as how we're presenting the game. Because that game session or night, we're talking about just pure entertainment.
Right. It's just pure entertainment for the sake of entertainment. Like every one of us turned our characters up to 12 for that game. Like we were just, any one of our characters in any other game would have been like a nice comic relief, but like we shoved it all into one game. So it's
absolutely,
it's almost a nightmare in some ways.
For sure. Well, it's been a good talk about unexpected things. Do you have anything else you want to kind of get through on this?
I was trying to think if there was other things that we should discuss more. I know we talked a bit about like the random rolls that we put into systems, and we talked a lot about some like random player interactions and things like that, and how modules have a certain expectation. I don't think at this point we've talked a lot about how this differs from the higher level of improv that GMs are expected to do on the regular anyway.
I see.
Because I think that, and we kind of hinted on this before, especially when we talk about things like maps, it gets a little rough to do DM prep on Roll20 and then have players do something that's not expected. So that's like a whole different level of problem if you're DMing out there versus playing at a table where you can just improv your way out of any situation. So
absolutely.
Let's just, I guess, talk a little about how would you handle that sort of thing if you're running Plague Stone and we decide that we're going to go down to the river first instead of into that house.
Well, I mean, if I was sitting at a table, just like a real table with real players around me, I don't think it's that difficult. You figure out what the flavor of the environment is. You figure out what the ins and outs of what a party is, like what your individual pieces are, why they're there, what they want to be involved with. And you just start improvising. And hopefully some of the elements in that improv can either point you back towards something you want them to be doing, or you just totally toss it in the garbage can and you say, well, screw it. This is the new plot.
Going. Right. And this is where we're going from here.
Now, expecting the unexpected here, Dustin.
Yes.
This may be more expected than you think, but I've drank too much water, so I'm going to have to take a quick step away, and I'll be right back. So go ahead and fill some time.
You need me to hang in here for a minute?
I do. Sorry about that, guys. I'll be right back.
God damn it, Jeff, and your bladder. What would you have done if we had a Gygax here tonight? It's a shame. All right. So I'm going to fill you in on a little something here that I like to do. And when I am DMing, I like to, and I did this for my Zweihander game, I created just some general battle mats. And what I did for Roll20, and if you've seen my Zweihander game, you've seen them in action. They just basically have like range increments. And it's like I had something ready just in case Jeff walks away. That's not me typing that. That's Clint. He put the yes or not appearing. But one thing I did was I created just a general battle map. So in case if there was a fight that started that I hadn't prepped for, or in case if there was something that didn't have a battle mat, or I made effectively token maps for the different systems in Zweihander, so that if they got into a scene that I hadn't prepared for, that I didn't have an actual battle map for, or that I didn't have certain things necessarily ready to go for, I could just move the tokens onto this other mat and run the scene on there and have that as my backdrop that had a lot of the rules on there for that system, things like that would help the players, understand what's going on in the system anyway. And then I just describe and fill in kind of everything else around it. So that was my workaround for Roll20 when I was running Zweihander, how I handle that. With a game like D&D with like 5e, there's not a lot of these other systems. You can still create something more generic like that you could use in those situations where you're effectively still theater the minding it, but they have some visual cue as to what's going on. So I created things like that just specifically because that's what I needed in order to work through Zweihander for an entire campaign. Was if my players decide to wander down a path I didn't want to go or anything else, I can move into this battle mat, throw the tokens on there, have it go down, and it was just generic battle mats that were built kind of in that way. Yes, Zweihander is Warhammer with the serial numbers scratched off, pretty much.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way.
So in many ways. We had Daniel Fox on here, and he talks about his early experience with Zweihander when he was writing it, and it started out as Warhammer, and there was a lot of things they didn't like about it, so they kept modifying it till it kind of became its own thing, and then started putting it out there. So it very much comes from that. It lives in that same kind of world in many ways.
Yeah, to kind of go back to what you were asking me a second ago when I was trying to dance around it. Some of the challenge to improvising in our current circumstances you allude to was the maps. And I don't have a good answer for you yet, just because I'm not particularly skilled yet at doing Roll20 maps. So for me, putting together a map in general is going to be a challenge. I happen to be lucky in this case that all the maps are already pre-generated. I think in my case, I would just have to go theater of the mind.
And well, that's what I was explaining, is that I created those Zweihander mats for my game to serve as my battle map, because everything is so narrative focused in that game already anyway that I can do that. And you could build similar maps for other systems like Pathfinder, where there's literally little circles that the token can move on to be like, I'm in flank. I'm in the other flank. So these are the two guys flanking because they're in the flank circles. This guy's at ranged, has cover. Here's the bonus written next to it on the map so they can see it, so they don't have to ask. Just little things that help move those combats along smoothly when you're not seeing an actual battle map.
That gets confusing.
Mechanical references, and that's what I put into my Zweihander maps, so that even though they're generic and you can't see the tree, if I tell you you're in a tree and behind cover, you can move yourself into the circle that says cover next to it, and that's a visual reminder to you that you have cover, and to me that you have cover. So I make sure to apply the cover bonus when we're doing the roll. I can adjust that immediately. So those were things I put on my maps to have cues that were generic that could work in any combat situation. And I built one for every system that Zweihander had. So there's a chase scene map. There's a magic casting map. And these were just generic mats. They weren't specific to any one particular battle. So I do have a lot of experience making Roll20 maps. So I've custom made almost all my maps that you see that appear in Raining Bullets. You saw a lot of my maps out of there. Everything you see in Zweihander that's a map is one that I've custom made from free assets that already exist on Roll20.
Yeah.
I just spent a lot of time doctoring them all up. All the DCC maps for Blackheart Othaculon, I made all those by hand, square by square by square. Yeah. So it's just tedious.
It's a lot of work.
But you get it done if you work on it. So I'm doing the same for Horror and Huttenberg. So
yeah, I mean, it's more power to you guys who are doing it. I know when I ran the Exalted game for some of the guys here, we did it all theater of the mind. In that game, movement was too big. There were too many variables into it. Like some people were like crazy, extremely fast. Some people were just normal speed. Some people had like extreme range. Some people had none. And so like it really didn't work for a a actual play on the map kind of scenario.
It lived in the same world that World of Darkness does.
Yeah.
You start talking like with vampires with celerity or werewolves who can turn to lupus form and they get like 40 times their movement speed or something stupid, like where they can literally pick their token up on a battle map and be like, I'm on this square this turn. Like at that point, it's arbitrary to have a map if you have characters that move that fast. So,
if it's all the party, then yes, it's arbitrary. But because it wasn't the entire party and because it wasn't all the NPCs, there was still an element that was necessary. And so it created a weird dynamic. So in that game, I went all theater of the mind for that one.
What was really funny with your Exalted game is you ran a module. One of the rare times again that we delve into module world.
Oh, you're digging way back.
Yeah, I'm digging way back.
The original one. Yeah.
The original one was the Invisible Fortress. Boy, if there was ever a time we needed a legit map.
Yeah.
In the Invisible Fortress. Because you're right, Exalted has some crazy rules for movement, this, that, the other. Like we're way overpowered, but like trying to find our way through the Invisible Fortress, like we almost needed a map.
Yeah.
It was
you're specifically talking about the basement dungeon portion of it, I'm assuming.
I'm talking about the initial building, finding the entrance to the damn dungeon.
Oh, you're talking about the mansion itself?
You had to move where the door technically is because we were finding it. The description alone was not strong enough for us to picture it in our head.
Yeah.
That we were supposed to be seeing. And if there had been a map, I think it would have been slightly more obvious that maybe we should be checking that area. So we never did quite, based on room descriptions, the way they were written, we just never did quite pick up on. Well, we literally ran into the building face first. It was invisible. We literally ran into it and then realized there was a building there. And then once we got inside, that whole thing goes south fast. But
I am particularly proud of a lot of the improvisation. Like, I think once you guys get to the dungeon dive portion of it underground, I don't think it was as catered to the group that was playing as some of the other stuff I was ad-libbing. Like almost all of the stuff that was above in that, in the actual mansion part with the house messing with you, impersonating people and making illusions that you guys thought you were fighting demons, but it was actually your friends next to you and that kind of stuff. All that stuff I was improvising.
Yeah. I know it kind of like, I think the module gave you some cues to like try to do things, but like, it was all on you. Making us want to kill one of our own party members at one point, if I remember. So,
because he missed a game, that's the price you pay.
What happens when you miss the game?
But yeah, I think expecting unexpected. Maps are trouble. Like if you are going full on, everything is on a battle map. All the cities are thoroughly mapped out. You've got everything laid out, and you're not quick at producing those in those methods. You're going to run into some real problems real fast whenever people go off the beaten path. So some of that, I guess, is the players have to, again, meet you halfway to know that, like, we're using Roll20, so maybe cut me some slack here. Maybe don't immediately leave the map. Right. You got to really work on your hooks, I guess, to make sure they want to be on the map. Give them some interesting reasons to move, I think, to other places on the map if you are building maps.
I can't stress enough that if you're running a module to probably feel at liberty to inject as many NPCs, plot hooks, and other things based on your player characters as possible into a story at game session 0 if possible. Like when they're making their characters, you find out who they are, immediately start finding ways to attach NPCs or something to the characters at that point. So that you have some of that baked in going into the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that would help.
That is crucial. And then
I was like, somebody in this town.
Continue to inject stuff into that module as much as needed to keep those players moving along that the obvious rails. Because good players will go ahead and play along because they understand the game they're in. But the more you as a DM or GM can inject that DNA into it, the better. It'll make your life easier as the module goes along. Yep. There's definitely some things in retrospect that I could have done differently. Probably would have been better.
Not to say that I think it's failing or anything like that. I think you guys are having a decent time of things.
No, we're having a great time just role playing, and that was my point. Like, we could literally just role play for 4 hours with these characters and like not actually go anywhere, and we would be okay with it. It would not be fun for you, but it would be
no, it's fun for me. I think that's the thing, though. I think a lot of DMs are afraid that everything has to be them constantly,
right?
And it doesn't. A lot of times, the players are going to want to take some time to just goof around. You want to make sure that you're aware when they don't want to do that. So, you want to make sure you have something worked out so that the players are bored and they're wanting things to progress. That they give you some kind of signal or something, and you can kind of get ahead and go move it along. But I also think it's really important to do stuff like what we're doing right now, where we're talking about what is and isn't working in a game.
Yeah, for sure. And
being open to feedback. So like if you're not willing to hear what your players have to say about what's going on, it's not going to be helpful. It's going to be a weird confrontation or something. But, if a game is not working for a player, they need to tell you, that you're wasting their time. They're wasting your time. It's so it's better for everyone involved if everyone just sits down and says, hey, look, this is what I'm not working with too well. This isn't hitting for me. Is there something we can do about that? And, I always like to make sure that I let people know, if you're wanting something, and this is for my players right now, if you're wanting something different, if the game isn't going the way you're looking, to spend your night doing, let me know. We'll make some adjustments. I'm happy to make adjustments. I'm not infallible, and no DM is. We all make a lot of mistakes every single session. So, be open to that feedback.
The good DMs are just really good at like sweeping it under the rug and like, yeah, that's totally how that was gonna go.
Right.
Totally didn't botch up that mechanic, and no one will ever realize it later. Like, unless I confess to it.
Yep. So, that's some of the thing I think new DMs struggle with, too, is people that would be DMs but choose not to, is that they think they've got built in their head that DMs don't make mistakes or that they just get it right every time. And that's the biggest secret, is none of us know what we're doing.
I totally killed one of my Zweihander players in Treefell with a mechanic that shouldn't have even happened to her character.
Oh, wow. Oops.
I forgot that she took a prestige class that she doesn't get chaos manifestations anymore.
Oh.
She gets divine punishments from her god after she takes on that expert class. Well, I forgot that in the heat of the moment, and we rolled, and what we rolled was so fucking good that she didn't even care. That after I told her later in the wrap-up show, I admit, I was like this, like, sorry, actually that shouldn't have ever happened to you. This is what technically should have happened instead. But she was like, but it was so well done. I was like, yeah, exactly. It was so good that, like, in hindsight, like, I don't even want to admit that I was wrong, but because being wrong was better than being right. So,
well, if the player was happy with the outcome, that's what matters, right? At the end of the day.
So, but
unless you're like doing a tournament or something where people are like grading how everything's being run, then I guess it's a different story. But
like with DCC, we didn't have that kind of luxury. But
yeah, it's a different environment. You got to understand what you're getting into. But I guess in that case, like DCC, there's not really a lot of room for improv at all. You have to run it essentially how it's
now
listed.
That the tournament's over and I can talk more openly about it. So all 3 out of 4 groups basically pulled the same trick on the first real bad guy that you have to encounter. Every one of us kind of triggered the angel at the beginning. Nobody got past that thing without making that thing show up. So, but there is a way you could have, in theory, got past the front door without the angel. So the first real thing that you encounter is Master Chazzelplax.
Chex Mix.
He hovers around on this disc. Now, the module states very clearly that you cannot knock Chazzelplax off that disc by normal means, but it does not give you a list of possible ways he can be knocked off or what the word normal means. There's not a definition there. It just says he cannot be knocked off by normal means. Well, magic's a son of a bitch. So, a wizard character's like, I hit him with a color spray. And you're like, well, okay, well, what does that do? Roll's really good. Okay, so what does that do exactly? It makes him unconscious. So in the heat of the moment, I interpreted that as this is not a normal means of knocking him off the disc. This isn't Levi using his Warhammer to do a knockback move or anything like that. So I had Chaz fall off his disc. Well, the other DMs, the other judges were like, "Oh, he can't fall off the disc." I'm like, "Wait, so what? Do you mean he doesn't fall off this thing when he falls unconscious? Because it would seem like he would just fall backwards."
Mm-hmm.
In my head, he just falls backwards and tumbles off the disc and hits the ground. Like, no harm, no foul. Well, I guess they should have had him collapse like on the disc. So even in a situation like this, where you're improving, there's sometimes, just based on loose interpretations, 2 or 3 DMs can see a situation completely differently.
Yep.
So even in a tournament scenario, like, we all played that in our heads, how it would work out differently than each other in certain situations throughout these dungeons. So it's still not apples to apples all the way through. You try to get the mechanic parts right to make sure that the spells go off right, things like that. But there is still some leeway in there about how, what Chuck did with that Graven Idol was like,
he rolled well.
It was a horror film. I mean, it turned that dungeon into a horror film. And
yeah, it did. But that's what happens when somebody can roll their dice.
But by the time it was done, like, Lich and DM Thaco were like, "That's what we're doing." Like, they were going to do the same thing if it came up in their games, and it turns out it did. So,
that thing was murder for them.
It was very different for you guys than it was for them, and that a lot of that is just Chuck's interpretation of how that thing moves versus my interpretation of how it moves. It's not described in the module as shadow stepping, but Chuck decided what it meant was shadow step, and I was like, I didn't
realize. I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, he's having it shadow step. It's the amount of light you create tells how far it can move, and we were all playing that the same. I was playing it lurking in the dark.
Yeah, I didn't actually. I watched that
episode. No opportunity attacks, so it didn't make a difference. But Chuck was having that thing, and DM Thaco had it do the same thing. It was literally moving shadow steps like through doors and stuff. Well, if I would have thought about it shadow stepping, I could have had it bypass the dwarf and come back there and hit softer targets in the backfield. But I assumed it was tied up on the dwarf a bit in combat because our dwarf decided to try to face tank it.
Yeah, he did.
So just a difference in interpretation of what move 20 feet means for a creature when it's not described how it moves, like, that makes a difference in how you play that. So there are, even in those things, like, even in those situations, interpretation by the DM is still there.
Well, there's also things from the player side of it. Like, if you get any 2 groups of players, it was basically exactly the Crying Angels from Doctor Who there, Malice. I thought that immediately as soon as we walked in that room. I don't even watch Doctor Who. But that's where I lose all the subscribers, right? As I said that, right?
Say shit like that, Jeff.
You gotta stir up controversy. That's how you get going.
This is going on the internet. It's going to be forever.
Forever. I stand by it. But anyway, every DM is different, but I think even if you had all the same DM run it for all the groups, I think each group's interpretation of what that scene looked like, what their internal models of it, what was going on, they're still going to do different things. Yeah. And it's still going to be unexpected. I mean, that's part of the game. The nature of the game is that it doesn't go the way you expect. It's not prescribed.
Like I said, the first thing you did was take a grappling hook out and throw it at that angel. That is not on the script. It's not an action that's on your character sheet. That's just one of those things where I'm like, make a ranged attack roll, Jeff. Like, just do it. Like, and it's so funny because in the judges chat, the 4 of us judges, me, Lich, DM Chuck, and DM Thaco, we're in there talking, and it's so funny because I think Lich was the one who said it first. Like, when you threw that thing, like, in the judges chat, he's just like, they always have to go off script. Nobody ever just shoots the damn thing. Like,
he actually wrote that in the actual normal chat. He wrote that. Of course, couldn't do the normal thing and just attack. Of course,
they don't do the normal thing and just attack it. Like, it's just how players are. And I think the more homebrew you are, the more homebrew in your games, the more you don't go down those routine. Like I said, when I say we have bad dungeon crawl habits, we are, however, then we compensate for shit tons of creative answers to shit that is not written in these modules.
Hey, when you hand me a character who looks mechanically like he can't accomplish anything, I'm going to try the obtuse and strange because
exactly. Yeah. Fuck it. So, when you're DMing, I don't care if you're DMing a module. I don't care if you're DMing homebrew. Like, you just have to be ready for players to exactly do the opposite of what you think they're going to do. Like,
yeah, they're going to do it. So, I mean, it's been good experience, I think, for all of us to try different systems, see that it's true in all of those. I think hopefully for the audience here, it's helpful knowing that this weird stuff doesn't just happen in your games. It happens in everybody's.
It happens.
And that it's just part of it you got to deal with. And part of it right now we're dealing with is that we're at the end of our show. So,
we don't have to guess. We don't have to go anywhere though, right? I guess
no, we don't. I mean, you want to keep
I guess for the sake of continuity of our content online, we should wrap this up.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe Clint wants to go to bed.
Sometimes other people that we are involved with do have schedules and lives and things, unlike me. So try to be reasonable to them and let people sleep in our audience that occasionally like to do that. So let's get our plugs in while we're at it. So if you are still in the chat and you are somehow not involved in our Discord, make sure you go check that out. There's a lot of people on there. We get in there. We do a lot of conversations like we talked about before. More stuff like this. Yeah, I know Malice Sleep. It's weird. SLEEP. That's how it's spelled. But anyway, go on there. Check it out. Keep in touch. There's sections for looking for groups. There's a place to advertise your own content or your games or anything like that. If you just want to talk about rules and weird circumstances that come up or whatever, or if you want to know when some of our shows are, it's all on there. So go check that out.
That's right.
If you are interested in what we talked about tonight or other topics that you may have missed in the past, or some of these episodes like the DCC content that we're going to be putting up, you're going to find all of our past content. And I think at this point, almost everything we've done is going to be up on YouTube before too long. And you can find that at this link that I'm posting in right now. So go check that out. I should probably clean up that link so it's actually our actual channel name since we unlocked that finally. And by the way, we are growing over there. So I think we're at like 134 people last I looked. So that's slowly starting to tick up. We're starting to hit some milestones. So hopefully people will be finding us more there and giving that a listen. So go check that out. Go through the back catalog, especially if you're interested in catching up on what's going on in our long-term homebrew game. So Dustin, you want to talk about the weekly schedule?
Well, of course, Monday nights, 10 p.m. here on the Wisdom Check, you'll find me and Jeff talking about TTRPGs, typically with the third person.
Typically right about
right here between the two of us. So
yep, there it is.
But you'll catch us here next week. We're going to be talking with Two Socks, who's Chris from Featherfall Table Talk. He was supposed to be here a few weeks back, had to unfortunately cancel. That was the last time there was an episode with just me and Jeff here, but he is back next week. I know we're going to talk at least about some DM fudge and dice rolls. That's all.
You were so obsessed with this concept.
That's because me and them have fought wars over this. So we're going to cover it next week. Be here for that. It's going to be when I'll be outnumbered 2-1, but I am bringing my ammo. I'm ready to fight. Don't you worry.
I love it when it's a fight that only one person cares about.
So I'm sure I'll be outnumbered greatly, but it is.
I will fight you to the death.
Hear me out though before you.
I'll hear you.
Decide, but
it's gonna be like that episode with alignment again.
It is like alignment all over. But so that'll be next Monday, 10 p.m. here. Then on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, Cameron, the Cam himself, is making music for our TTRPGs, and his music debuted this last Everstorm game.
Sure did.
I unfortunately have my sound off, so I don't hear the music. It makes me very sad. I have to watch when I go back and watch it later, because I do rewatch all the shows. I do hear it then, so I do get to appreciate it, just not at the immediate time that we're role playing, which is sad, but just the way I have my computer sound set up, it would be picking up on my microphone, and you'd be hearing an echo, and it'd be bad. So to prevent that from happening, I don't hear it, unfortunately. But he's making those on Tuesday, and you as the viewers, however, get to enjoy it while you watch us play. And that's totally what you can do, is listen to it while we play, and you can also come Tuesdays and watch him make the music, because that's a pretty cool experience as well. That's Bardic Knowledge, 8 p.m. Central Time, Tuesdays. Wednesday, 10 p.m., we're back for Jeff's game, Fall of Plaguestone, Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Fall of the Ceiling? Yeah.
It's lots of stones falling, most of them not plagues. Oh, man.
We always get rated right as we're doing our outro. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Night Tide.
Here again. Night Tide. Thank you.
Welcome.
For the 15, we're here tonight. We were just finishing up our weekly podcast. Well, see, you guys end right at midnight our time, and that's right when we end. And we appreciate your raid.
Yeah, we do. We really do.
You're ending right about the same time we are. So, it's not that we don't appreciate it at all. It's just, I think we're actually on the same schedule.
Yeah. Well, that goes to right back where we were at a second ago. So if you guys are just joining us, please, apparently it's happened so recently, I can't actually link my Discord. We do have a Discord. It is, I'll just copy and paste this thing. Right about here.
We're on the same activity cycle there, Night Tide. You're right. You caught us at the end of an actual play session too. Same sort of situation. So,
and we also have all of our content up on this YouTube. So go check that out. And Dustin's describing our weekly schedule, which is pretty appropriate. It's down in the panels below. So if you look down there, you'll see some fancy logos and stuff that tells.
Right. So
Dustin was describing that.
Mondays, 10 p.m. here for the Wisdom Check, where we talk about TTRPGs, usually with a guest. That guest could also be you someday. So get in our Discord. Come talk to me, Dustin, TT2KB. You'll find me on there. And we can set up a time where maybe you get to come on here and talk with us. So make sure you come do that. In the meantime, then Tuesday, Cameron, he makes our TTRPG music here. You can find him doing Bardic Knowledge, 8 p.m. Tuesday nights. Wednesday, we're back for Pathfinder 2nd edition. Jeff runs that game. It's the Fallen Plague Stone. You can spend all kinds of those cool cams that you're collecting down there at the bottom for the chat. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with those, and the even better techno-powered pan points that you can convert them into from our Streamlabs. And then that is Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Central Time. Thursday's World War Z. I don't play that game. Jeff does. Tim does. Cameron's there. Clint's there for that one. They will do all kinds of fantastic, funny voices for your cam donations. So get down there, donate some cams, and pick out just any old voice you feel like.
It's a total nonsense shit
If you
show
want
of
to
a
be
game.
nice to them, you pick one of their characters and make them do that for a little while. Otherwise, you just give them some random voice and push their voice acting capabilities. Which is the only thing.
By the way,
sad that I'm not in that because I want to do that. But
yeah, absolutely. By the way, thank you for the follow there, Mr. Kilster. And
we
there's
got
another one in there. I think I saw both of them.
yeah, Mr. Kilster.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, and actually our Thursday night, we may be switching games here and there. So before we were doing 7 Days to Die, and that Dustin was part of.
That's true.
We might go back to doing that.
That one.
Or we might try some other games. I don't know. We're having a lot of fun with World War Z, but if there's another game we want to play, we'll mix it up. And I do think the voices, though, are where it's at, though. So
Still
we're
holding
gonna
out for Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Still holding out for when Baldur's Gate releases. I think that'll definitely make an appearance here on the channel when that finally hits stores. So
awesome. And then also, we haven't decided when we're going to do it just yet, but we're pretty happy with how our giveaway went before. So we have loaded up on some inventory to give away. So if you're interested in getting into Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, as Night Tide's saying they're getting into it now as a newer person, we are probably going to do another giveaway of the core books. So if you're a subscriber and a fan of the channel, you will be eligible for that at some point. And we'll mention that later as we get closer to that point.
Which brings us to our Saturday. We take Fridays off around here normally, unless I'm running some special content on a Friday. Fridays around here is a night off. Feel free to go watch Airleys or her people play on Friday. They have a Lost Minds of Phandelver game. So you can go check her group out on Fridays. We don't do anything Fridays around here, but then Saturday night, 10 p.m. Central Time, every other Saturday, which unfortunately this week is a no-go. But the following Saturday, we're back for Everstorm. It's our homebrew high fantasy 5e game ran by our own DM Levi. And we're in the middle of a giant skeezer plot with Jeff's character. There's way more skeezers now than I'm ready to track at this point. So we're going to find out what's up with all the skeezers, why we keep finding more of them. And maybe we're going to get some answers to at least one character's back plot in this game.
Feels like it. It feels like it might happen.
Close. So it's gonna be fun. I think. I don't know. It's gonna be a dinner scene. We'll see how it goes. I guess.
I'm excited. I think it's gonna be great. Last few games have been awesome.
It's gonna be pretty interesting. So, so come check that week from Saturday. That's our weekly content around here, Jeff.
Yeah, somehow we got through it. So definitely check out our stream team down below in the panels. You'll see the links to all their stuff. There's a lot of them these days. So Gonna make sure you go check out their content. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, there obviously is one more. I want to make sure that we are copy and paste this up here, showing some support to a local artist, David Lee Pancake. My dad, he is a 3D sculptor, and he typically makes his entire career, he and my mom, on selling his artwork at conventions. And he primarily does dragons and fantasy-like things. And a lot of what he does are these gigantic trophy heads of dragons that you can mount up on your wall. He has those. He has wall-hanging things. He's got paintings. He's got all kinds of stuff. They're very meticulously done. He's won tons of awards around the country. He's been artist guest of honor at a lot of places. And as you could expect with the COVID-19 situation that all of us are going through, well, there are no conventions. So any help you guys could provide would be much appreciated. He has got a Patreon that I've linked down there. So you can go on there, you can get some discounts, you can get access to some unique items. You can also get behind the scenes views of how he puts together the stuff. And he's also starting a weekly stream now where he's making our characters. So every Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, he's going to be on there with me. I'm going to be answering chat and helping him along with that. And he'll be making the cool stuff and telling you how he's doing it. And it's a good time. So go check that out. And check out his website if you're interested in making a direct purchase. There's all kinds of amazing things on there. And I really would appreciate it if you guys checked it out.
That's right. I know I said this during his stream when I was watching last Sunday, but when Levi did original art for my character Valorant, like I was already like ecstatic, right?
Yeah.
And then I got to watch him on DM to Art, which is another show we do, and I would love to tell you when it's happening next, but I'm sure Levi's told us when it's happening next.
Yeah, he hasn't told us.
Actually, I think he put it up today. Hold on. Hold the phone.
Hold the phone. We have an information dump?
Yeah, hold on. I think so. Hold on. Why do I...
Hey, while you're doing that, I'm giving Night Tide rights to Discord. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. While you're in that Discord, I'm going to tell you that you can find DM to Art tomorrow, May 5th, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Morgaine Part 2. He's working on the last of the characters from our Everstorm game. So tomorrow, May 5th, you can watch Levi, our DM, do DM to Art. Well, as I was getting back to, though, he did art for my character already. My art is done for Valorant, and it was awesome. And then I got to watch Cameron make a theme song for my character, and that was freaking awesome. And just when I thought the awesomeness was over, now coming soon, he's not starting with him, but coming soon, I'll get a chance to watch David Lee Pancake sculpt my character, and that's just going to be so badass. Like, I'm so hyped for it.
I'm super pumped to see how I'm all done. And he's actually talking about making and casting them so that people can buy them.
That's so badass. I'll be the only one who buys Valorant because no one likes Valorant, but I'll fucking buy it. I don't care. I'll probably buy Valorant. Gotta have that asshole, lovable asshole hanging out in the corner. But yeah, it's really cool. It's all the creativity that's been flowing around our group and the people we're associated with is tremendous. And it makes it a lot more interesting, and just it's amazing to be able to share those behind the scenes experiences. So, with the audience here, I appreciate you guys, and thanks for coming and seeing what we do and seeing the all the random stuff we're into, and what we like to share. So you got anything else, Dustin? Or I do.
You're looking for raid targets?
I'm doing both. I'm going to talk a bit while I'm looking here.
Well, rock it out.
I have started the process of casting for my next Zweihander game.
That's right.
Horror in Huttenberg. Some of the new promo art I've been working on, I put up. I've got 4 invites out at the moment for players. So some of them are starting to come back with some yeses and nos. So pretty soon I might have an idea of our entire cast.
Well, you already got one ass in a seat. So
I know one guy is sitting right here with me right now. This will be your first Zweihander game.
Yep.
So I do have one very experienced player lined up in the form of DM Chuck. He is signed on. DM Chuck, who is now a GM, an official GM for Zweihander over on the Zweihander channel, where he plays regularly. So he is very ecstatically excited to get to play in it. I know that Malice there from from Smart Gamer Network. He is extremely interested in being in, so I'm talking to him.
Yeah.
I've got some conversations going on with Naravia from Naravia TV about coming to be a player, and I got maybe one or two more that I'm working on, that we're working on schedules and times. So if I can make all this work out, I'll have 5 or 6 players, and that'll be coming summer. I was originally going to be fall, but I think it's going to start sometime in the summer. So
this all hinges on the fact that Dustin foresees my Pathfinder game going into a earthquakey end really rapidly.
No, it comes into the fact that I have moved to Sundays for that time slot. So this game is going to be taking place on Sundays.
Gotcha.
And because of that, yeah. And what'll happen is that we just won't have anything on Wednesday for a while, because Jeff's going to bring his game to a rocky end soon, and I'll be playing on Sundays instead. So found us a raid target here. Awesome.
Well, I know in that party we'll have 1 pyro that will incinerate the rest of the party. I don't know what to expect from Malice. It's been a while since I've gamed with him, and it'll be good. It'll be fun. It'll be nice. Apparently there's a lot of hiing in the chat right now. So hello, everyone.
Right.
All right, so what do we got here? Scabby Roosters.
We're heading to Scabby Rooster. Playing some D&D tonight, it says. So we're going to go talk to some Scabby Rooster.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us. And I think we may have already gone off.
I hit a button, Jeff.